What's up, everybody? Happy Thursday. You may notice it's just me on screen today. We normally have two advocates on. It's usually me and a host or someone else and a host. Today's a little bit special, though. We will have more than just me up here today, but that will come in a second. For now, though, I think what we'll do is we'll just stick to the normal routine. We're going to go through our release notes. I'll give like a quick demo of something cool that came out with this new release. And then we'll get going with our guests. We have two new developer advocates that I'll be bringing up, and that's why it's just me for now, and we'll sort of give them an interview. And then we have another cool guest from the community. So what I'm going to do right now is I'll just go through the release notes, and then we can kick this thing off. So let me see here. All right, cool. Let me bump this size up a little bit. So this week was 4.14.0. This was our most recent release. And what we have with this release is mostly just a bunch of improvements to Prisma Client. We are really focused on performance improvements right now and just cleaning up the experience when working with Prisma Client and starting up serverless functions with Prisma Client, and just in general the developer's experience when working with Prisma. So that's what we're going to see a lot of in this release, but I'll just go from top to bottom and talk about some of these things. The first one we have here is, this is actually not something we changed, but something we're asking about, request for feedback for our preview features. We have a bunch of preview features, and most of these are like really high value target items that we've had from the community. We've built features around these that are in preview right now, and they're kind of just waiting on feedback to make sure that we've covered all of the use cases that you guys have. So what we're asking is, if you have time and if you're interested in any of these specific issues here, go in, try the preview feature, test it with your use case, and then just let us know how it goes. If it works really well, then that's great. Go ahead and throw a thumbs up in there. If you run into any problems, if you could just leave us either a reproduction or just a description of what you run into. That way we can make sure it gets solved before we actually push it out to be generally available to the public instead of blocked behind that preview feature. These ones that we've mentioned here are ones that we specifically want to get out pretty soon. So these are ones where if you take a look at these, definitely give them some consideration. After that, we'll move on to the highlights from this release. Like I said, we didn't add any changes to the API. We didn't add any like super major things that change how Prisma works. What this mostly is performance related things. It mentions here that we've been working on performance over the last couple of months. I wrote a blog post about this, actually, a pretty detailed blog post about things we've found, things we've changed, and how they actually affect serverless cold starts. If you haven't read that yet, definitely give this a read. I don't want to toot my own horn. I worked on this with a lot of other people on the team, so this was definitely a group effort. And the result is a really detailed article that, if you're curious about how we work in a cold start, definitely give it a read. Next, we have the introspection warnings for unsupported features. If you paid attention to the last stream, you may have seen this was called stopgaps before. That was a little bit of a strange name, and we wanted to make it a little bit more clear what this actually is. So what we're doing now is we're calling this introspection warnings for unsupported features. And what this means is, if you are using a database and that database has features that you're using that we don't support directly in our Prisma schema, it previously would give you some sort of error, or it just wouldn't really recognize those features that you were using. Now we want to actually catch those so that you can be sure that you know what's not working and how to get around it. So we're implementing these checks when you introspect your database. For example, I think in 4.13.0, we had one for sorting your indexes and whether you put the nulls at the beginning or the end. I walked through a demo of that. If you want to look back on that one, or if you did see it, you might remember that. That's one of those examples where if you have that in your database, now when you introspect your database, you're going to get a warning that says, hey, you're using this thing. We don't support that yet. Here's a link to the issue. And eventually we're going to have documentation on each of these checks. We're working on getting those put into the docs right now. But that all being said, these are a list of 3 new checks that we've put in place. So these are 3 new things that you'll get warnings about when you introspect your database. Lastly, as usual, we have a long list of fixes and improvements, and these are all sort of based around, like I mentioned previously, just the developer experience, working in mono repos. I know things like this has been an issue where you have a custom output and for some reason, maybe PNPM or whatever system you're using can't recognize where schema.prisma is. We've got a lot of fixes around those, as well as just performance enhancements. Finally, we have an update to our language tool, which is specifically with VS Code here, where you can set up region marker folding. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. I'm going to demo that in a second because I think this will be super useful. And then, as usual, we have credits to everyone who helped us out on this release and the contributors. So that's it for the release. If you want to check this out, it's on our GitHub. If you just go on the releases, 4.14.0. But what I'll head into next is I'm actually going to demo really quick this language tool feature just because I think it's worth showing you guys how it works because I think it'll be really useful for you. So I'm going to switch over my screen and we'll get into that right now. All right. Oh, it's still showing my other screen. Let me represent. This is window. There we go. Sweet. All right. So what this feature is it allows you to add folding regions into your Prisma schema file. That way you can group up models that are meant to be together. The reason this came about is we've had issues before where Prisma schema files can get really long. Currently, they're limited to 1 file, and you put your entire schema in this 1 file. That's by design at first, but it also leads to really long, sometimes confusing files. So what we've added here is we've added this feature of VS Code and editors in general, where you can add a comment, and you can type region, and then you can give it some sort of description. So, for example, right here, I'm going to just say, user-related models. And then we have our user model, we have our profile model, and preferences too. Those will be related to a user. So all these models are sort of related to what a user would have in your application. At the end of those, you could type a comment, pound sign, and then end region. And what this does is it allows you to actually fold this. So within these region blocks, you can actually fold this down and sort of group things up. And this is useful because now you can move your models around next to things that are related to each other and actually put them in these regions and fold them down, shortening the size of your schema and allowing you to sort of easily navigate through these things. Of course, this isn't a replacement for splitting up your schema file into multiple files. There's a lot of community tools that do this for you, but I think this is going to go a long way in helping to make these a little bit more manageable. So give that a try if you're having any issues with schema size, and that should help you out a bit. That's all I had to demo today, though. I think this was the really cool thing that came out with this release. So I think what we'll do next is we'll actually move on to our first guest, and that's going to be Marc, who is a new developer advocate at Prisma. So I will transition over and we'll bring him on board to have a little chat. What's up, Marc?
Hey, how's it going, Sabin?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Excited to be on What's New in Prisma.
Awesome. I am super excited to have you. For context for people who are listening, I'm one of the lone US developer advocates on our team, which means oftentimes when I'm waking up to start working, my coworkers are going to bed. And I now have 2 US developer advocates to hang out with throughout the day. And it's been about a week and a half now that you've been around, and it's been like a really great week and a half. So I'm super excited to have you on the team. This is great. I'm really happy about this.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, you've been super great too, answering all my questions and helping me out with like everything I need. And knowing that, I have somebody else in the US that I can just ping whenever I want, which has been super great getting me on board. And I'm already doing things. And it's kind of thanks to you, to be honest with you, that I've got up to speed so fast.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I can help. But yeah, you guys are doing a great job to, in your first week. Um, so why don't we, well, first of all, I guess I'll just say, Marc is a new senior developer advocate at Prisma. He joined and he's bringing a lot of good experience to the team. And we're just super excited to have his breadth of knowledge to add to our team. And Marc, why don't you just sort of introduce yourself, just general background about you, where you're from, things like that. It doesn't have to be super technical, just a bit about you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I'm from the DC area, born and raised in that area. I'm a Washington, I guess, Commanders fan, unfortunately. If anybody's out there that likes football, but yeah, I've been doing development for one way or another since I was like 15. I started off doing like MySpace profiles for people in high school, and like I was in a metal band in high school too, so I was like always updating my band's MySpace and things like that, and that kind of got me into coding. And then alongside all of that, I was actually doing content creation stuff and like making Minecraft Let's Plays on YouTube and doing all different types of gaming stuff. And throughout my life, I've always kind of kept those two things together. And I've been a dev for the past professionally for probably the past like 8 years. And then I was working on projects all through college, but alongside all of that, I was also doing content creation and community building and things like that. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of basically who I am. I'm a creative person that likes making cool stuff, right? And then all these dev tools and processes that I come up with on this, live streaming, making YouTube videos, all that. It's just kind of like a way for me to be creative. So anything that allows me to fiddle with things and make cool ideas, I kind of end up learning it and doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That specifically, your experience with live streaming and video and all that stuff, gets me really excited because I mean, this stream that we have is really great, and the way it's set up, I love the way it looks. But I don't know how any of it works. Someone set it up, and I kind of just log in. It's going to be really good to have your experience to come on and like tweak things and just make it better as we enhance the show.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting for me. One thing you mentioned that I actually didn't know, I may have read this somewhere, but I didn't know, is that you were in a metal band at one point?
Yeah, in high school I was in a, I don't even know, it was like a metal like screamo band, right? We were
Oh,
like
wow.
screaming and hardcore heavy metal stuff like that. Yeah, I played guitar and I did like backup screams and things like that. When it was me and my best friend growing up, Steven, we were like, we played baseball together. Like I was in baseball all through like elementary school, middle school, and then like we both got a guitar at the same time. And we just like, well, like, we're just make a band. And then it just kind of ended up in high school. That's what we were doing, and we were playing shows and having a great time. So yeah, that's a fun part. That was a fun part of my life. But nowadays, I still write music. I still play music. I'm just not in a band. I kind of do it all on my own and put out music every now and then, and just play my guitar, stuff like that. But yep, heavy metal. That was a good time for sure.
That's awesome. We'll have to jam sometime. I have some stories to tell you. We'll have to take it offline, but
All right, cool,
I've played music for a bit too. We'll
sweet.
start a Prisma band.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. I think why don't we talk a bit now about like your career so far, your experience leading up to where you are now, and sort
Mhm.
of like how you got here.
Yeah. So when I first left college, I started working for it was kind of a smaller startup out of DC, and I was actually the only technical person in the company. Like it was like their first kind of developer hire. And it was good and bad and at the same time, because it was really good. I was new. I was young. I was able to like experiment and try new ideas. I was building out an application actually for the company that they were using to like operate on and stuff like that. But then also me being the only person in there was kind of stressful. It was a lot of work. And I was also young and naive, and I thought I could do it better than everybody else. You know what I mean? That's kind of, I feel like how all devs start with like, oh, I could make that better. And then you realize, no, just it's already exists. Just do it. Right. Um, so yeah, I mean, I started there, and then I've gone through many different, multiple different companies, from big to small, working on different projects, learning different technologies, doing different, really just problem solving with deving and technology and stuff, and just trying to help these businesses like solve their problems. But over the past like 2 years since COVID's hit, I've been doing a lot more smaller contract stuff. So I've been going into like different companies and like helping them kind of get started or get their applications together, or like just reviewing technologies, or maybe I'm there for like 6 months and I'm helping like set up the process for code reviews and all that stuff. So it's just kind of like all over the place, really. I mean, that's kind of how I am. I kind of get interested in something and I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess I'll do that. But it's always been about just like making cool stuff. And if a company that's hired me has been like, hey, we have something cool to make, then that's kind of where I end up going. And then I was looking for a job recently, and just because a lot of life changes and things like that, and I was like, let's get something a little bit more stable than just contract based work. So I started applying to things, and I was actually talking to a recruiter, and the recruiter was looking over my stuff, and I was talking to him, just saying how I do like content creation and things like that on the side. And he was like, have you ever heard about developer advocacy? I was like, no, what's that? I didn't realize like it was an actual term. I like knew people made YouTube videos for companies and technologies and did all this. I didn't know it was an actual like thing. And then he was like, yeah, you should look into this. You'd be really good at it. So then like from that moment on, I was just like, okay, that's what I want to do. Cause like it basically combines all of my favorite things about this world, like about what we do, making cool content, helping people, teaching, building cool applications, working with new technologies, things like that. It kind of combines all of that into one thing. And I'm like, okay, that is what I'm supposed to do. It just took a little while for the world to catch up and make a role for what I'm supposed to do. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm at now. And then I applied to Prisma, and yeah, I'm here. So I'm excited about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that story of like sort of discovering developer advocacy is even a thing. I hear that so often. Like that seems to be a common trend where you have these creatives in the technical space who feel like they're missing out on some of their creative, outlets. And then you just stumble upon this role and realize like, oh wow, that was made for me. That was my story for sure. And I'm glad you could sort of find the same thing.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was something companies paid people to do. I thought it was just like, you would like get a, hey, can you make us a video or something like that? I didn't realize it was an actually like job. And I was like, oh man, this is great. Like this is perfect for who I am. So yeah, I'm super excited to be a developer advocate at Prisma for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. So with your years of experience sort of like leading up to here, have you always worked with JavaScript and TypeScript, or what's sort of your experience, and what technology stacks do you like to work with?
Oh man. It depends on the project. I've always been the type of person that has learned how to do something based on having a project to do it for, right? So I was never, whenever I tackled a project, I was never like, oh, I know how to do it. And one of my first languages was like PHP, right? Well, I know how to do it in PHP. I'm just going to do it in PHP. Was never really my approach. So I always tried to find the best solution to the problem of whatever I was making. And that has led me to learn a lot of stuff. And, I started with like C++ into PHP, back into C# and then into, JavaScript and TypeScript. And then over the past few years, I've just been kind of all in on JavaScript and TypeScript. And really getting into like the Jamstack and learning the frameworks and building applications in that, in the serverless environments and all that. So it's been kind of a long road of technologies as far as like things I've learned, but it's all based on a project that I have. So, maybe one day there'll be something new that comes out that's like the best way to do this is to write in PHP again or something. And I'll like, okay, I guess we'll, pick up PHP again or something. You know what I mean? It's just one of those times. I'm not really, I don't have this is better than the other. I think they're all just tools in your tool belt to make cool stuff. So,
yeah, for sure. I totally get that. I grew up writing Cold Fusion in my career, and moving to TypeScript and JavaScript was a bit of a shift. And I still firmly believe that there's some projects where I would go back to Cold Fusion for, just because it fits nicely. But yeah, that's interesting. Very cool. I think the next thing I want to ask is, I was going to ask you why developer advocacy, like why you chose to come into this, but it seems like you kind of answered that a little bit already. So I think I'll move on to why Prisma specifically. Like,
Yeah.
given what we do, we work with databases. A lot of people find that boring. Like, why are you interested in Prisma itself?
So when I was looking for a job, I wrote down on a list like 5 companies that I would like to work for, and Prisma was on that list. It was like my top 5. Like if I had a, like if I could get one of these jobs, I would be happy, type of thing.
Hmm.
And it was, the reason being was because it was something that I used every single day. I've been using Prisma for the past year and a half, and every single one of my projects every single one of my projects I set up, I use Prisma. Like it's just kind of part of it, right? And that, I mean, that is probably the main reason. But then also, if you look at like what Prisma's working on as far as like Accelerate and some of these other products that we have coming out, it's like there's really big things that Prisma's doing, and it's not just an ORM. It's not just for databases. There's a lot of really cool things that are coming out, and I want to be a part of it. And I feel like being on kind of like that edge of new tech, and being in that cycle of putting out new products and always iterating, that really excites me. So, and I guess you could really find that at any kind of company, any sort of like newer tech company. But knowing that Prisma is something that I use every single day in all my own projects just enhance that like want to work here more, because being on the inside and just being a part of that, creating something that's awesome, and that people really, it's also being a part of something that people use to create cool stuff. Like it's like I whenever I'm explaining this to my family members, it's like when you're talking to a painter and you're trying to sell them a paintbrush, right? That's kind of what like Prisma is. Prisma is like the paintbrush, and you're people are making cool stuff with it. So being able to be a part of something that people use to make cool stuff, like that's exciting to me too. So it's kind of like a combination of all that kind of stuff. But
nice, that's awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. The stuff going on at Prisma right now, I wish we could just share everything, like
same,
like just
same.
spit it all out to the public, because it's really cool stuff. And when people think of Prisma as just an ORM, I have a hard time like holding my tongue and saying we have all this coming out, because some of it's secret.
I mean, I've only been here for a week and a half, and the whole time I'm like, whoa, we're doing that. Wait, we're doing that. And the whole first week I was just getting like, I was like, oh man, this is cool stuff, So I'm I can't wait for the community to see what Prisma's up to, and hopefully we can make cool stuff that you guys can use to make cool stuff. You know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly. And I think just to let the audience know, I will be doing a plug at the end of a cool release that we'll be having soon. So we won't leave you completely in the dark about all this stuff. We'll give you some of it. But yeah, that'll come later though. So you have to stick around to the end if you want to hear that. Okay, I think I have one more question for you before we bring on Jon, and that's just what excites you the most about the tech space in general right now, just how things are going. There's been a lot of changes recently with like Vercel Ship, and there's a bunch of other cool stuff coming out. Like I know Cockroach DB is having like a really cool, I guess, evolution of their product right now, and it just shows that shift in technology. So like, what excites you the most about things going on right now?
It's not any one product or any one technology that's come out. It's really the philosophy that I feel like a lot of the tech space is following right now, where it's let's empower the individual developer. Let's empower the creative person to make cool stuff. And I think that mindset is going to be great for the future of people that are developers and want to make things, knowing that I can spin up a project in a day and have people utilizing it. Just the idea I had at the top of my head, that's not something that was really possible like 5 years ago, even maybe even closer than that. Having some of these powerhouse companies and things that you can use just on your own without having to be a part of a massive company yourself. It really enables people to be creative and make cool things, and honestly make things that help people. And the more we're able to do that and utilize these tools, the better everything's going to get. So that's probably what excites me most about the current landscape. I really think in the future it's going to be about the developers that can think of cool ideas to make cool stuff, and not necessarily working for massive companies and doing the 9 to 5 and all that. I think that's kind of like where the future's going. It's kind of like I call it like the rock star developers, right? It's like you're going to be like a developer, you're going to be a rock star. You wake up and you'll have like text like, hey, could you work on this? Could you do that type of thing? And I think all of these changes and things to the landscape of technology are kind of helping that happen. So I'm super excited about it.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. that deserves its own stream. I could talk for hours about how I feel about the way the technology is moving. We'll have to consider doing something like that actually, because I feel like we could get a lot of good conversation out of there.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you for sort of walking us through your background and what excites you and all of that. I think for now I'm going to bring you off stage and we're going to talk to Jon. And then once we're through having a chat with him, I think us three will all just come on and talk to our guest a bit.
Sounds good. Thanks again.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Hey, Jon.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing very good. Very excited to have you and Marc on the stream today. This has already been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was good hearing Marc talk about his past, and I want to hear more about being in a heavy metal band. I think I'll, knowing Marc, I'm sure there's a YouTube video somewhere that I can dig up and embarrass him in public. So I might have to do that.
Absolutely. Tweet it out on the Prisma Twitter channel so people can see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So just to quickly introduce you, once again, just like Marc, this is a new senior developer advocate on the team. Again, just like Marc as well, he comes with a lot of knowledge and a lot of new, fresh perspective onto the team. And Jon, we're super happy to have you and really excited to have you on the team.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be here. This is kind of dream come true, let's say. Really, it's been a really great team so far, and it's been great joining the team.
Awesome. Great. Well, that's great to hear. I think I'm going to ask you a little bit more about your experience so far, just in the first week in a little bit. But before we get there, let's do sort of the same thing we did with Marc. Just a bit about your background. Doesn't have to be technical, just sort of you as a person in general.
Yeah, sure. So me as a person in general, currently based out of Austin, Texas. I've been in development and the sort of tech world for 8-9 years now, I guess. Went to college for a traditional computer science degree, and was lucky enough to get a full stack junior dev role out in San Francisco. Moved out there, did that whole thing. And then over time, sort of have been specializing towards back-end development until quite recently. And now we're here in developer advocacy.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's kind of hard to specialize just in back-end development now, right? As technology.
It's challenging. And I really feel for folks who are looking for new work or new roles right now, because the number of times I get asked, hey, do you know React? Hey, do you know Vue? Can you help us out with these things? It's every week. It's crazy.
Interesting. So now that we've sort of talked about your personal background, what's your technical backgrounds? What kind of technologies have you worked with in the past, and stuff like that?
Yeah. So out of college, I was working, like I said, full stack development, but that was jQuery days. So those days are long gone. So that stack was jQuery, Django's REST framework. This was pre-Django 2, I think. So doing Python development. And then after that, as I got more into strictly backend development, focused in on Python and Scala. Had a brief Scala stint, which for better or for worse. And then I forget how many years ago now, Node.js really took off and really caught my interest. So started in that, and then after that, started hearing about TypeScript and stuff like that, and that sort of combined my knowledge of heavily typed, Java, Scala, and I guess also functional programming, but then also the ease of the Node.js ecosystem and the ease of deploying applications in that environment.
Yeah.
So JSTS has like sort of consumed everything I've done recently, but I still kind of try and keep track of Python and JVM stuff when I can.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've never really played around with Scala. I've fiddled around with Python a bit. I've never like worked professionally as a Python developer, but I actually really enjoy that language as well. How do you think?
Yeah.
How do you
Sorry,
think,
go
like,
ahead.
Scala? No, it's all good. How do you think like Scala and those languages compare to working in TypeScript? Like, do you think there's a huge mind shift as you switch those languages? Because we see like on Twitter a lot of people talking about TypeScript and Node, but that's like our little bubble. There's a whole other bubble that talks about like Python and all these other languages that we don't even see.
You know, it's so funny. The term like what's old is new again and all that jazz. Like JVM's been doing strongly typed language stuff for decades now. So the fact that, you know, people in the JavaScript community are saying, you know, there's this debate on, oh, we love TypeScript, we love typing, we want to move towards that like strongly, you know, protected area, and then other people who are saying no, like no strong typing. I want no typing in my, you know, typing annotations in my code. That's the exact same conversation Python is having. With type hints and their type annotation system. I think it's it points towards typing being good when all these different languages are sort of coming towards the same conclusion. And then you have extremely typed languages like Rust becoming more and more popular. So like in that space, all these communities are having like the same conversations, whether or not, you know, a developer in one of those communities is in another. As for like working in the different languages, you know, I would say that sometimes it's pretty easy switching from one language to another and thinking, for example, like Node.js and some of the web application frameworks that work in that language are pretty similar to Flask and Python. I might get some very angry tweets about that statement, but for example, Django is like very, very different and is much more akin to Rails. And if you've been in that environment, and then Scala, if you look deep enough in the TypeScript community, there are people who are like trying to bring those systems into TypeScript. So optional types, which is a concept in TypeScript, but in Scala, it means something slightly different. Whether something is successful or not, like a promise, the concept of an either, which is like a left or a right, meaning a failure or a success. That's really in Scala, and there's a lot of libraries out there trying to bring those types into TypeScript.
Interesting. Cool. Well, that's all very awesome. And I kind of want to now take this into the direction that we sort of went with Marc. So why, after all of that technical experience with all of these different technologies that are varying across this wide spectrum we've been talking about, why developer advocacy? Like, it seems like such a different field from what you were doing before.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. So the first thing I want to say is like it was like a really natural progression for me to come into this kind of role. Like I said, I started. Maybe I didn't mention this, but I started my career in education technology. So working where our user base was students, teachers, that sort of thing. So education has always been top of mind for me. And in that same vein, accessibility and making sure that whoever wants to use our application can, regardless of where they are or you know, what languages they speak, you know, what their background is, that sort of thing. And so even though I like kind of went pretty heavily into backend development and I was in relatively closed source ecosystems, that background in education, that love for education, is really what made me happy. Even so that when I was, you know, a senior dev at some of these companies, communicating with external engineering teams who are consuming our products, consuming our APIs, that was fun to me, which is perhaps rare.
Yeah.
And talking with them and understanding, hey, what are your needs? Here's our new product. Do you want to beta test it? What do you like? What do you not? That sort of thing, like, really excited me. And so much so that when, similar to how I heard Marc's talk on, once I learned that developer advocacy was something I could do, I jumped at the opportunity. I said, yep, like, chatting with developers, understanding developers' needs and understanding and helping developers get to where they want to be. That's awesome. That's an awesome opportunity for me, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And one point you made is very true, is that the idea of a very technical person who also really enjoys reaching out to people and being social and just like talking to people about technologies and like discovering their problems. That is sort of a rare combination. I've worked on many teams, and often it's like a one or the other type of thing. You have a really charismatic person, or you have someone who's really deeply ingrained in the technology. It's hard to find that unicorn.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm really ingrained in the technology. There are developers out there, especially in TypeScript and stuff like that, who have done amazing things. And in the Prisma community, let's be honest, like, who have developed like incredible apps built on top of Prisma. But you are right that, I kind of understand the technical aspects of what they're trying to do. And I really enjoy bringing the social aspects of understanding the problem space and understanding, hey, how can we make your lives better? Because we've got a long way to go. Everyone does.
Absolutely.
And I'm just happy to make that happen.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So thinking about like Prisma itself, now that you've joined Prisma as a developer advocate, what excites you the most about what's going on at Prisma right now? And I think I'll actually combine this question. What excites you the most about what's going on with Prisma? And then in a more general sense, in the tech ecosystem in general around what Prisma does?
I can't say what I think is most exciting in Prisma. For folks watching, stay tuned. It's going to blow your socks off, really. So, there's a lot of cool stuff upcoming in Prisma. And I think it's really gonna, as like a developer, I see the things, I'm like, crap. Like, I'm thinking about 3 or 4 projects. I'm like, I really could have used that.
Yeah.
And that's a great feeling. So I'll just kind of like push that question to the side and respectfully decline to answer. But in the tech ecosystem, I think there's a lot of cool, exciting things coming out. And I think that you have this push towards, I guess you could call them ephemeral deployments, maybe. So, when folks like you and I started development, deploying applications onto on-prem racks or and then cloud, when that started becoming more of a thing in data centers, that was the way of deploying applications. And as time has gone, like, the more and more of that stack has just been chipped away until, you see things like what was announced at Vercel's conference talk
something like
last
that.
week. Last week, where it's like, just deploy things and it just kind of all works. I had a really good conversation about Dino Deploy recently and their KV product, and how it's the exact same code locally and in the cloud, and it just does different things. That's amazing. That's like something that could not have been fathomed of 5 years ago. Maybe even sooner. So that sort of like rapid acceleration in the tech space is really cool. It's really neat to give like developers this consumer developers. I'm not sure Marc used the term like rockstar, like single person developers, to be able to get this level of benefit that was once only available to larger corporations. That's cool. That's a really cool democratization movement. It's exciting space to be in.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember Monday mornings at my first job. Everything was on prem. Monday
Mhm.
mornings, I would come in like an hour and a half early with the rest of my team so we could do a deployment, which involved opening up FileZilla, dragging files over to our production environment, restarting the servers. We've come a long way, and I like how you put it. We're sort of chipping away at those responsibilities and handing them off to a cloud provider. Um, that's the goal. That's what everyone's trying to reach in a wide range of technologies, not just JavaScript, like the JavaScript ecosystem. You see people who are entrepreneurs. There's people who have product ideas and they want to build their product. They love software development, but they don't want to think about how it's deployed. They just want to deploy it and let people use it.
Yep.
And I mean, that's what Prisma is focused on a lot right now. We've been writing a lot about it. And there's going to be a lot more coming up about it in Prisma's future. Like you said, Jon, not a whole lot will explicitly describe here, but yes, there's a lot of cool stuff coming out around that. So yeah, no, I think that's great. Well, I think for now, I think that's great. I think we'll probably move on to have Joe up, who built Bridg. But beforehand, we'll do a quick transition so I can just get everybody up on stage. But thanks
Sounds
for
good.
having a chat with me, Jon.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Cool. All right. Hey, look at this, a full screen. Not often we get 4 people on stage at once. That's really cool. Welcome, Joe, to the stream. Awesome to have you on. Why don't you introduce yourself a bit before I talk too much about you?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Joe. I'm a full stack developer at a startup called Balance Theory. We make knowledge management software for cybersecurity teams. So you can think of it kind of like Notion for cybersecurity. And in my free time, I've been working on Bridg.
That's awesome. That's super cool. So we brought you on today to talk about Bridg. So this is a really cool community project that that we sort of picked up on our team. There have been a couple conversations about it internally just because we think it's really cool. So we were super excited that you agreed to join us and sort of show us around. Why don't you, could you give us just like a quick overview of what Bridg is before we actually jump into like the sort of technical talk about it?
Yeah. So simply put, Bridg is a library that lets you run Prisma queries on the front end. So that could be any JavaScript front end. It could be your website. On a button click, you could run a Prisma query, or you could do it on an Electron app, a React Native app. Anywhere from the front end, you can use Prisma.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. When I first heard this and when I saw it brought up within our internal Slack, I was like, oh, running Prisma clients or Prisma queries on the client side sounds kind of sketchy. And then I started looking through the library and you showed me a bit about it. And man, this is really cool. And it's got huge implications on developer experience. And I'm pretty excited about this.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. What caused you to like want to write this tool? Like what sort of initiated it?
Yeah, so originally I was just getting extremely irritated of writing the same exact CRUD queries for every model. Like I would have a user and I would have comments and I would have posts, and every single one had the same CRUD APIs. And I didn't want to have to keep redoing that over and over again. So initially my plan was to write like a generator that would just generate the APIs for me, generate my fetch logic. And that got pretty annoying. And then I realized like, I just don't want to write these APIs at all. That was my like eureka moment. Like, what if I could just use Prisma directly from the client?
Yeah, that's great. And you sort of, when we had a call previously, sort of described this as like a Supabase or like a Firebase, but using Prisma, which I think is a really cool way to put this, because if you think about what that means, it's like almost Supabase or Firebase, but with bring your own database, because Prisma allows you to connect to anything. So it sort of like democratizes that experience on any database you want to use. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I played around with it. I mean, I've tried Mongo, SQLite, Postgres, what's the cloud one called? PlanetScale.
Yeah, PlanetScale.
They've all worked great for me so far. So I haven't tried every single, like Azure, I haven't tried. There's a few of them, but I expect they would work just the same.
Yeah. So let's I think with this kind of tool, I think it's good to just sort of like pop open some code or even the repository and just sort of look at the API and what it does.
Yeah,
if you want,
sounds great.
would you mind sharing your screen?
Sure. Let's see if I can figure this out. Entire screen. There we go. All right, you able to see it?
Yes, sir. Yep, right there.
Okay, just as an example, I built like a little blogging app. So we have a list of all the blogs on the platform. I can like sign out, I can sign back in, and then it has like CRUD operations. I can go look at my blogs. I can create a new blog. I can edit my blogs. And
so
basically
this is
here,
full application, like using a database, right? This is all data.
yeah, this is
stored.
all this is using Bridg, except for right now this query. Just as an example, I was going to port this from an API request to using Bridg, like using Prisma on the front end. Okay. This is using a SQLite database, and it's a Next.js app, but it doesn't need to be Next. It could be Vue, it could be any framework of your choice.
Gotcha. Cool.
So this like home feed here, it's using a typical like, I'm going to go fetch from an API and I want to figure out like, what is this data? And then I want to render it out. But here, if I look at blogs, it has type any. So if I want to like do some special rendering with blogs, like what are the properties on blogs? I don't know what that really is. And what if I want to update the way that the shape of this data, like I want to do some inclusions or do some extra filtering, then I have to go to the file. So let's just go to that blogs API. And right now what it's doing is it's just querying. This is like an actual Prisma query and getting all the blogs in the database and then passing it back. Bridg, we can just literally take this, copy this, and instead of doing the fetch, let's comment this out so you know that it's actually working and paste that in. So now this is running this on the client.
Wow.
That's when I first went through this demo, like following the instructions on the GitHub repository and on your website, that just seemed like magic to me, that you can just copy over this query and just run it and it works. That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, like the cool part is now if I want to start like messing with this, so let's say I want to include the author too, I can do it right here and I don't have to go back and forth between all the different files. I can include, now if I save this, we can see in the app, it updates with all the authors. And if I hover blogs, it's going to give me the actual shape of the data. I don't have to worry like, oh, what is this? And then if I want to go and like render specific things, I'll get the type of completion like blogs dot, and it's an array, which I wouldn't have guessed at first, and then dot whatever. This works. Like,
yeah, that's
deeply dot whatever.
That specifically is really cool now that I'm seeing it like actually happening in the editor. So this makes it really, really easy to get that end-to-end type safety, right? Because there's like, if you think about it, there's like no work required to get that end-to-end type safety working because it's all in this one file already.
Yeah, it just works right out of the box because it's using Prisma. It's a lot like TRPC or something like that it's gotten really popular. And TRPC is a great project. I've tried it out a few times. I just find it extremely complicated to implement for the first time. Whereas this just works.
Yeah, it's like the same thing as like with GraphQL, where it's like you can get that really nice end-to-end type safety. You get that like nice sort of package of what's going on, but it requires you knowing how to set it up and like the inner workings of, or I guess not the inner workings, but like the mind shift from normal API development to these GraphQL or TRPC APIs.
Yeah,
and this sort of just removes that and goes, yeah, just run your queries in the client. That's fine.
Then you don't have to worry about creating like your GraphQL resolvers or whatever. And that's always a pain in the butt. Yeah,
that's awesome. So I think when I first saw this, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this right now are thinking the same thing. When you see a query happening on the client, if you're a developer and you're working in the technical field, your brain immediately goes to, how is this secure? Like, how can you actually do this? So what sort of measures do you have in place to limit what people can do on your database from the client?
Yeah, so first off, it feels like we're actually using Prisma here. Like if I do db dot, see I have an account table, a blog table, a session table, and a user table. But usually you'd also have like execute raw and things like that. So it's not actually Prisma. It just feels like you're using Prisma. Under the hood, what's happening is we can actually just go look at the node modules for Bridg. If we go to app, this client, and then here, what it's doing is it's basically each one of these functions, and these are just generated from Prisma. Each one of these functions is basically running a post request. So you'll pass it your model. So I'm going to run it against the user. the method you're going to run. So that might be find many, and then the arguments to the function. And then you'll create an API that will handle that request. So you just have to, for Bridg to work, you just have to create one API endpoint that'll handle a post request. And then you'll go ahead and feed that to this handle request function from Bridg. So you can use whatever like auth system you want. I'm using NextAuth here. I extract the user ID from the incoming request, and then I pass that to Bridg. And then Bridg uses that to authenticate. Like if you can basically create rules that say that only the person who owns a blog should be able to read it. And then you'll be able to use that user ID there. And you'll pass it your Prisma instance, and then the rules that I was talking about.
Interesting.
Those rules are built into Bridg itself, is what you're saying. That's
the
awesome.
rule system is built into Bridg, but then you'll basically declare your rules as a JavaScript object, and then you'll pass them in as an argument when you execute the query.
That's like an extra little feature that you don't have to do yourself.
Exactly.
I was actually thinking maybe it would be useful for this like rule system to be usable on the back end too. Like if I just want to run some Prisma query on the back end and I know this is the user that's hitting my API endpoint, maybe you just say like db.auth.user and then whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this rule system here, can you sort of walk us through like how you would set up a rule and like why it actually works?
Yeah, so if we didn't have these, basically if like there's a default here, but the default is false. So if you don't have these, nothing's gonna work. Like it's just secure by default. So you'll have to declare rules in order to get queries to work. If you wanted to ignore that in development, you could just change this to true, and then basically everything would resolve. You don't want to do that. But basically it'll work. The keys of this JavaScript object are your different models. So I have a user table here, and then each key of that is a different basically method. So you can have update, delete, find, and create. And then what you'll pass into that is either a Boolean, like true or false. If it's true, that means you always want this to work. Like everyone should always be able to read all users on the system. If it's false, it means that you should never be able to read any users on the system. I can actually just go ahead and update this now, and you'll see that this will fail because it's failing because remember we included the user data on top of the blog. And the cool part is that was an inclusion. So we were querying the blogs and including the user, but it still knows, okay, I'm going to run the blog rule for the blog.find and then run the user rule for the included user.find.
Gotcha. And then that sounds pretty complicated because you get really nested like database sort of relations there.
Yeah, I mean, it can go infinite levels deep. So I had to use recursion, which I hate using, but I didn't really see another option. And
one of the few good excuses to use recursion, right?
Yeah, right. And then the last way you can do it is via a query, like a where statement. So if I wanted to do that for update, I can, and you'll get type completion for this too. These are the properties for a user. So this would be like, you would only be allowed to run updates if the email of that user was a@b.com. Like you wouldn't actually do that, but that's an example. Another example would be like on the blog, you can see down here, I have published is true. And it's an or statement here. So like either the blog is published or the user owns it. Like this is a pretty common pattern. This callback provides the context of the request. So the first argument is the user who's making the request. And then the second argument for updates and creates is the data that they're trying to work with.
Okay.
Yeah. And from that callback, you either return a Boolean or you return the where clause. And that where clause, when they make the query, it basically gets applied as an and. So whatever query they're making and the rule that you've established.
Gotcha. Okay. So I really like how it defaults to no access from the beginning, and you have to like sort of turn things on instead of the opposite where it's open and then you turn things off. It makes me think of, I never used Firebase a whole lot, but I did play around with it like when it was first coming out, and I played with it for a bit. And it made me think of like their access controls, which were always super confusing to set up within their dashboard. That seems sort of like what this is, but this has a much like better developer experience, sort of writing those accesses in your own language.
Yeah, just getting the type completion on the queries is so helpful. I used to work in Firebase too, and I know so many projects where it was just read true, write true, and anyone could just come by and just delete their database at any time.
Right, because if you wanted to set up more granular control, it was like a whole new language that you had to learn, right? Within their, at least back when I did it, I haven't looked at it in a while. It was like a text box where you just write like it wasn't even JavaScript. It was just some language that they invented, basically.
Yeah, it was like JSON, but then you could have strings of like pseudocode kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the same thing with RLS for Supabase. That's how they row level security. That's how they secure their database. It's extremely powerful, but just not quite as intuitive as something like this, I don't think.
Gotcha. That's cool.
What are some of the things you're still working on adding to this, or some of the cool things you're like, oh, I can't wait till I put that into this?
Yeah, one thing that I would love to add at some point is real-time data. So it's literally just Firebase right now, so that's not really an option out of the box. So I'd have to build that. So that would be one big distinguishing factor between like Supabase and Firebase and this. But another thing you could do is you could also use this in conjunction with Supabase. So you could have a Supabase database, use Bridg to query that database, but then also use Supabase for the real-time functionality.
Very cool. We'll have to chat about that more. I have some thoughts on that for sure. Yeah, no, this is really, really cool. Are there any like specific parts of the API and about how this works that you're like really excited about specifically? Or is it mostly just around this whole idea of type safety and running things in the client? Is that sort of like the general idea of it?
I think my main goal is really just to make creating apps as easy as possible for people. Like when I first got into like web development and full stack development, Firebase really did a lot for me. Like it opened up a lot of doors and let me build apps that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So this is kind of like my love letter to Firebase. And this is kind of like what I wish I had 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, that's cool. I like, honestly, as you were showing me this yesterday when we were sort of going through it and just watching the actual code right now, this is something that I feel like, especially if I was working in like a Next application like this one, or like Remix or something, like I would almost reach out for this instead of just directly using Prisma client in some cases, if you're really focused on getting that type safety.
Yeah, well, the cool thing is that it works so well in conjunction with just using the Prisma client, because you can copy and paste the queries back and forth. You don't have to worry about that. And then if I have some job that absolutely has to happen on the back end for certain security reasons, like say I want to set, like, I don't know, increment something, obviously you can do that via Prisma, but if there's some job that you want to do only on the API, you could still do that and use Prisma. I think they work very seamlessly together. Yeah.
And I've said this on this stream multiple times, but I'll repeat it again because I like to do that. I see Prisma client as like a building block that the community can build upon. We give you all the basics you need to like build complicated things, but we avoid doing things that are too complicated and magic under the hood. That way people have the opportunity to sort of build what they need with us. This is a prime example of that. I think this is, taking sort of our our primitives and making something that's really, really usable for the community and has a great developer experience based off of our product. And that's really cool to see you doing stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, this would not have been possible without Prisma. Like the equivalent would be I could send SQL queries back, which is basically what I think Postgres does, more or less. And the experience is just night and day, it feels like, when you're using it.
Yeah. For sure. I think Mark kind of asked this, but I think as we get closer to the end, like what do you see as the future for this? What's coming up with this stuff you're still working on?
I'd love to get more like community involvement. I've just released this like the last week or two. So if I get people using it, stress testing the rules, seeing if there's potential vulnerabilities with the rules, like there's a lot of different scenarios in which you can use Prisma where you can you can do an update and then inside of the update in a relation, do a create. And I have tests for these things, but I suspect there possibly could be certain ways that someone could get around them, like do like pseudo SQL injection style of attacks. So I have the GitHub at bridge.dev. That'll just redirect you straight to the GitHub. And then while you guys were talking earlier, I created a Discord. So if you want to jump in there, and if anybody wants to chat about anything, if you have questions, if you have problems setting it up, just ask me. I'll get right back to you.
Awesome. Do you have a link for that Discord already? If not, no worries. But if so, we can throw it in the chat if you want to send it to me. That way people can join right now.
Yeah, it's right on the, let me see, right on the top of the GitHub, and then I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
Or I'll put it in the private chat, and I'll see if I can, I'll put it in our chat.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll copy this over right now. So everybody watching, if you want to join this Discord community to maybe learn more about the tool or just contribute even, there's the Discord link there. Go over to that and join in. I had one more thing. Oh yeah. On Prisma, on our website, we have an ecosystem page where we have different tools listed that the community's built. I know, Joe, you've submitted this tool to the ecosystem page. We're going to be, actually today, I'll be looking into like actually getting that on because I think this is something really useful that a lot of people would reach for. And it would be a great addition to that page for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm already thinking about how I can mess with it this weekend or something.
Yeah.
Build around, see what I can do with it.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, that would save me a lot of time. Yeah,
Mhm.
so we'll be good.
Hey Joe, I actually have like a quick question because I was staring at this trying to formulate my thoughts. The keys that you have here, like for example, in the blog block, like update, delete, find, do those map like one-to-one to Prisma model functions? So like you can include any of the Prisma model functions there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me pull up the repo really quick. So I actually have it here somewhere. So find maps to find many, find first or throw, find you. So you kind of get it. It tries to map as like intuitively as possible to the Prisma methods. So find will be basically fetching data, update will be updating it, and then vice versa. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I was just curious about that. I was like, okay, wait, how many of these do you have to specify? But yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, I could have. That would be a good idea though if you want specific rules for like. For some reason, say I wanted to have find many have a different rule than find first, I could add extra rules where you have more specificity. Like I'll have like a general find, and then maybe you could also specify like find many should work this way explicitly. So that's not a bad idea.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, well, thanks for walking us through this. I think this was really good. I know if I was watching this stream, I would be on the repo already figuring it out because I'd want to play with it. So I encourage everyone to go take a look, leave feedback too, because I'm sure Joe would appreciate any feedback you can provide, as this is built for you guys to use, and I'm sure he wants to tailor it to what you guys need. So go try it out. Jon and Marc, do you have any more questions for Joe?
No questions, but good job, man. This is awesome. I think it's super cool. I'm excited to use it myself. So
thanks
for making
it. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. You are someone that I've wanted to have on the stream for a bit ever since I've seen the project. So I'm happy we were finally able to get you on. I think with that though, we'll go ahead and let you off the hook here. And I think we're getting pretty close on time. So we'll just wrap up with a couple of plugs. So again, thank you so much, Joe, and we'll see you around. I'll shoot you a message afterwards and we can chat a little bit.
Okay, sounds great. Bye, guys.
Right, cool. See you. All right, cool. Coming up on the end of the stream, as usual, we have just a couple of plugs, and I think I might actually need to bring up my screen again for this. So let me add it to the stream. And once again, I'm going to have to switch this around. One day, I'll figure out how to share a screen properly, but today is not that day. There we go. That's it. Okay, so we have a couple of plugs that we just want to talk about. But before I do, I'll once again say these preview features, if you have a chance, go take a look and leave feedback where you can. Those will be coming out pretty soon. But I think the next thing here is our ecosystem page, which I'll pull over right here. We have this ecosystem page. It's the thing that I mentioned that we're going to be getting Bridg on pretty soon. This is just where you could submit packages that you've built or any tools that you've built around Prisma, and we just showcase them so that we can get a little more visibility out there. So if you have something that you've built that you think is super useful, just like Bridg, go ahead and click this button here and you can submit your package. Also, if you have something like Bridg and you want to do something like this on stream, please shoot any of us a message, me, Jon, or Marc, and we'd be happy to start a conversation and get something on the books there, because we really enjoy showcasing stuff that you guys have built. You can see my show notes, but that's all right. Nothing super secret. The next thing is we want to let you guys know again. We've sort of talked about this in the past, but we do have this new label called Discussion Community Help Wanted. And what this label is for Prisma power users, or just anyone who's using Prisma. Ooh, that was strange. Anyone who's using Prisma that has been in it for a while and sort of knows what they're doing a bit. And this sort of gives you guys a chance to filter down issues and discussions in our GitHub repository where you might be able to provide some help to other community members. We want to build and foster a community of people who, sort of look out for each other and help each other out. And I think this is a really easy way to be able to search through and find stuff that can be actionable right away if you have some time and you want to go help somebody out. So we've been seeing a lot of people start to use this more and more recently. So I just wanted to give it a plug and remind people that this is available to use and is a good opportunity for you to sort of, harden your own skills and your own understanding of Prisma while also helping other people out. So definitely consider going here to our discussions and looking for this Community Help Wanted label. And then I think the last thing that I want to mention is that we have a new developer advocate coming on Monday. And so that means along with Jon and Marc, we have a third developer advocate coming on Monday. I just wanted to announce that because I'm super excited. We're going to be having him on the next stream, but keep an eye out for that so you can follow him on the socials and we can just get him up here and start talking about Prisma. But with that, I think that wraps up our stream. Jon, Marc, if you have anything to say before we close out, otherwise, I think this will do it.
Nothing from my end, but yeah, loved being on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, excited to be here. It's gonna be a good time.
Sweet. All right, so with that, I guess we'll wrap it up, and we'll see you guys for the next release.
Thanks, everybody.